think we really need stereo. Like, whoever needs stereo in a podcast?
No one needs stereo. Actually,
nobody needs
literally on the
stereo.
way home from work today, because I mean, I know I live like 3 minutes away, but I stopped by Burger King because I
Yeah.
was just I didn't have much in the house, like I knew,
Oh
and I
yeah.
was like, I'm just gonna get a chicken sandwich because I'm tired. And Burger King makes pretty decent chicken sandwiches, at least when your options for food in this area, fast food, are like Burger King, McDonald's, or Culver's. It's like, might as well like eat any of
Yeah.
those, in my opinion. I mean,
Yep.
probably
I
Culver's and
mean,
Burger King would be like A tier, and
I
then
yeah, yeah. I mean, McDonald's is clearly S tier, like above that.
oh
But
really? Okay, yes.
no, not at all. Culver's would be S tier.
But yes,
Burger
my
King would
my
be like A,
actual
and
my actual
McDonald's is like
point,
C
I was
tier.
listening to a podcast, driving to Burger King and then driving home, um, and the audio was like one host was all left and the other host was all right, and it was kind of
Ugh.
funny. It was just like, why did this happen? But
Maybe it
whatever.
makes more sense if you're watching the YouTube video and one's on the left and one's on the right, but it's still kind of gross.
Yeah, it's just
I don't know about that.
not my thing. But yeah, so here we are. This is not Paul, by the way, for anyone who picked up on that. I'm Paul, but this is not Paul. We
Hello,
have
my name is not Paul. It's been a strange number of years since my parents named me that, but no, my name is Aaron. I'm a guest podcast host, I guess now.
yeah, we
I
have
can put that on my resume and everything, right?
yeah, I would put that actually top of the resume. I think that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
companies are really looking for these days. So, so PK is currently moving, you know,
Oh.
cool story there, I guess. Good enough excuse. I think he just didn't want to do the pod with me this week. But he's currently
Fair enough.
moving, and so as a result of that, he said he would be pretty much busy like all weekend and therefore unable to record in time for our normal Tuesday publishing date. And I said, cool. And Aaron is a guy I've known for a little bit here, and I knew
Hot
he'd
second.
probably be up for talking about some movies. So
Oh, yeah.
Aaron generously agreed to sub in. So that is why he is
Paul
here.
was like, "Hey, you want to do a podcast?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he was like, "Okay, cool." And I was like, "Well, what do you guys talk about?" And he was like, "Well, like movies and stuff, and talking about Tomorrow War." And I was like, "Okay, cool. So you like are into time travel, right?" Obviously. So you can blame me for suggesting that we watch Looper, I guess, right?
Yeah, so we watched Looper this week. So that is, it should have been obvious to anyone who clicked on this video, to like the 3 people who watch, because the title is probably going to be like Looper, shouting at screens, episode 5. But
Can't get enough of time travel, I guess.
yeah, I
you know?
guess we're just on a time travel. We're stuck in a time loop that involves watching time travel movies over and over again. I
Yeah.
did think that would be a funny, like, since we did Edge of Tomorrow again, since we reviewed it 4 years ago, and then we did it again just last week. I did think about how funny it would be to do like an Edge of Tomorrow podcast as a joke, like have a channel dedicated to Edge of Tomorrow podcast, and it's just an Edge of Tomorrow podcast every week.
It's just Paul and then somebody else, maybe named Paul, maybe not named Paul, and they're just talking about Edge of Tomorrow over and over and over again.
And you try and keep it as similar as possible, just like slight differences each time. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
That
don't
would
know how
be
many people would actually bother listening to that. Would be the main
almost
problem.
impossible to market. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's not even worth thinking about further. But speaking of time travel, I did really appreciate. I don't know. I don't want to like rain on the parade, but Looper. I guess. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? I'd seen it before. I'd seen it maybe. Man, I think I saw it in high school. So it's been at least, I don't know. It's been a hot second since I've seen that movie. And,
Yeah, it came out in like 2012 or something like that.
yeah, I think so.
And yeah, so this is a movie that was directed by Mr. Plinkett's son, Rian Johnson. And
Oh, really?
This of the 3 Rian Johnson films I've seen, I will definitely say this is the best one. It does seem to have the typical Rian Johnson trope of watch movie, and your immediate impression is, that was like pretty fun, I guess, like pretty cool and well made.
Man, you came off. And you came off that one movie feeling it was pretty fun.
I honestly, there were scenes in it that, like, maybe it was because the time I was watching it was like very late at night, because I think we went to the premiere. I'm pretty sure. I mean, not like the global premiere, but it was like a premiere for the area we were in at the time, and so I think it was like basically like 2:00 or 3:00 in the morning when we were leaving the theater. And I just watched Luke Skywalker, stare down an entire army, and I was like, that was pretty sweet. And then
you do come off on a pretty good high on that one.
Yeah, and then like you start to remember, like there are parts of that movie that I literally just forget. Yep. Like you forget until you go back to rewatch it, and then you're like, oh yeah, this happened in the movie. I forgot that happened. Like just literally just totally forgot this entire sequence of events that was. And you know why I forgot it? Because it was pointless and didn't contribute to anything. But anyway, sorry, this is not a review of The Last Jedi.
It's a review of Rian Johnson.
Yeah, we're just actually going to talk about all of Rian Johnson's stuff right now. But it does suffer a little bit from his trope of seeming, to me at least, seeming like fun and good at first, and then like the more I think about it, the less a few things make sense. But I'd say overall, this is probably the best Rian Johnson film I've seen, and I did enjoy the movie overall. So that's what I'm going to say about it for now.
Enjoyed the movie overall. I would definitely second that for sure. As far as time travel movies go, I mean, there's a couple lines where they're just they do the classic hand wave, but I think it does a really good job of kind of just establishing this universe of I guess what I listened to one episode. I actually just listened to the Edge of Tomorrow episode. Speaking of that, which also stars Emily Blunt in this movie as well. So that was a fun little connection. She does time travel movies apparently. But yeah, it was. I don't know if we want to give a brief synopsis, but it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a kind of scummy underground element in the mafia lifestyle sphere. He works for the mob in the near to farish future.
2044 is the date that they
far enough away that far enough away that the future seems futury, but also in 2044 when we're whatever in our 70s or whatever 60s.
We will not be.
I know I can't do math. I can't do math
will
on short notice.
I don't know how old you are because I thought you were younger than me, but I believe that we will be in our 40s in 2044. So.
Sure. Well, we can look forward apparently to telekinesis being a thing.
Yes, apparently that's a thing.
People from the future coming back to murder people, also from the future.
What's funny is it seems like
the basic premise.
It's that whole thing with people from the future coming back to get killed. One thing that I thought was funny is that I would assume that would be a super secretive thing you'd have to keep really hush, but it kind of seems like this is a pretty well-known job in sort of the scummy, seedy underbelly place where this guy exists. And it's wouldn't that make it harder to get away with in the future if this was a known thing that was happening? In the past, they're oh, we're gonna have to look out for this, and
that's kind of a good point, actually. Yeah, I mean, okay, so literally, I want to point two things out. So the first line of the movie is time travel. That's literally the first two words that
Joseph
Gordon-Levitt. Yep, his name is Joe. Which might get a little confusing.
Enough, yes.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Rian Johnson just couldn't think of a name for the character, and he's well, I know I want Joseph Gordon-Levitt to play him, so we'll just call him Joe for now until I think of something else, and I guess it's stuck. That's my headcanon. But anyway,
but the basic premise is, he's what is called a looper, which is kind of this mafia position where they, in the year 2044, are tasked with killing people sent from the future, because basically in the future murder is really hard to get away with. They have really good detectives or tracing technology or something. They have a couple little lines that kind of set that up, but they send them back. They invent time travel, which is immediately banned, and you can just watch the movie, and this is the first 30 to minute long like
this is all explained
monologue
to
at
you
the beginning.
immediately. Yeah, a little exposition.
It's a
right
little
off the bat.
exposition-y. It's a little exposition-y at times, this movie, but
A bit of
he's a looper, so
narration.
you get this time, you go to this place, like predetermined place where this person will be sent. You shoot them with I guess it's called a
They call it
blunderbuss.
a blunderbuss. It's basically just like a sawed-off shotgun, essentially.
Yeah, it's a sawed-off shotgun. It has a very limited range, which is set up for the rest of the movie, but little Chekhov's gun, kind of, I would say. Kind of not really, but because they shoot. There's a lot of. I'm interested to hear about the guns in the movie because that's a whole.
I like the guns in the movie. Is my
Yeah?
I mean, it's unique. You could say that they're not necessarily the most realistic choices, but there's a lot of like just fun stuff that happens with the guns in the movie. So that's why
There's a lot of moments that I'm curious to hear your take on, where like people are very inaccurate, especially with handguns, and like it is very realistic. But I also am kind of like there's a lot of the mob guys that are like they're called gatters or something
Gats,
like that. Gats.
yeah.
So I assume it's just like an abbreviation of like gunmen or something like that, and like I believe it's all set around Kansas City, somewhere in the American Midwest. I don't remember if they actually named the city or not, but
a lot of farms around.
it's
city.
it's in the American Midwest, and I think to your point of like they kind of own the city, which makes it sense. Like, oh, this is like the only place that loopers exist, I would guess, in this universe. Like,
yeah, it's just like this is
so
a miserable city that like is
like
every time
abandoned,
everything we see in the city is like criminally overrun and
extreme prostitution and
lots of
homelessness.
people.
Yeah, there's very casual murder, which
yes, that was that.
Yeah,
there was like a couple scenes from that right off the bat that are dark but also almost funny, where like some guy steals something and a guy just like whips a shotgun off of his bike and shoots him in the back.
Right in the back. Yep, that was. I was like, wow, this is a very depressing. They also have like eye drugs,
Yeah, they have some sort of drug
very
that you
addictive.
take with an eyedropper, I guess.
And that's what our pretty much everybody's like addicted to and stuff, and it kind of gives you a weird wobble view and stuff.
That's
also
like
okay.
them attempting to show being high, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it is what it is.
It works, it's cinematic. What they have to do.
They gotta make it visible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so yeah, our main character is this looper. He's sent to kill people that are sent from the future because it's hard to kill people from the future. That was the only point I was really trying to make.
Yeah, and so that's Joseph Gordon-Levitt gets, he's doing this thing, and there's a rule that's basically at the end of your contract, for some reason, because they don't want, like, because time travel is so illegal is the reason that's given, which again, this is a part that doesn't fully make sense, but it's like a fun story element. Basically, to close your contract, the future people, the future mob, will basically find your future self that's, alive in, 30 years from now, and they will send you back in time, and then you will kill yourself, and you'll get like, it's a special thing because like, okay, all the victims have bags over their heads when they arrive. They're tied up and they have bags over their heads, so you don't see who you're killing until after you've killed them, or at least you're not supposed to. And then like normally the payment is they attach 4 silver bars to the back of the person they want killed. They send them back. You kill them. You get the bars off of them. But when you kill yourself, they send them back with, I think, 8 gold bars.
Like a bunch of gold. Yeah.
Yeah. So like a lot of more valuable metal, and also you get more of it. So that's like your final bonus for doing the deed.
It attracts a very short-sighted
group of people.
Type of person. Yeah, like
Yes.
you're only gonna get like maybe 35 to 40 years. Who knows how long as a looper? I think they say like the main character Joseph Gordon-Levitt is the youngest looper that ever got hired to do the job. So it's like Yeah, clearly you were not thinking super far ahead of like at any moment I could be knowing exactly when I'm about to die 30 years in the future, you know?
Yeah,
So,
that's kind
yeah.
of an interesting idea. The idea that they have to kill them 30 years in the future is also interesting, though. It's like,
I think
why?
that's just the number. Like there's a lot
Well,
this
the
movie does
idea,
a lot of like
yeah,
time travel shenanigans. And like there yeah, like I said before, there's a very good line where it's like it doesn't like I think he literally says like we can talk our ears off. There's a really great moment later on. I don't
yeah,
do we
he,
want like how
we
spoilery
can
are
get
you
into
usually?
spoilers. I'll just say if you
Okay.
haven't seen the movie, I would recommend watching it. It's
I
not
would as
like,
well.
yeah, it's not like a flawless movie, but like overall, this is like a pretty cool, like a lot of cool ideas, and also
Mhm.
the one thing I'll like say, in terms of the implementation of time travel, overall good. There's a couple nitpicks I'll probably get into later when we get into spoilers, but it does have a pretty good overall presentation. One scene I do like is it sort of establishes. You can argue whether or not it makes sense, but there's a good scene that sort of establishes the rules and then the consequences if you break the rules and how that works exactly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty well done. Even if you could say like, wait, how would that actually work though? Whatever. That's
Yeah.
just how the time travel in this movie works, and it's mostly consistent for the whole movie.
Yep.
So as
Yep.
long as the
I would
movie is
say
following its own rules, I'll go with it.
yeah. I would definitely agree. I'd recommend it to most pretty much everybody. At the best it's a fun like little jaunt into time travel, and it raises a lot of questions that can maybe lead to fun discussions about like just time travel in general and like, you know, is it creating a new timeline, or is it creating a new like version, or is it all just the same version? You know, there's some interesting questions there. And um yeah, but and also it's like there's a lot of fun violence and action, and it's also a very interesting character study, I would say. Like you really I think I resonated personally very well with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and the other, like, you know, his older self, which is also part of the movie, is played by Bruce Willis. We didn't really touch on that, but the whole premise is basically, yeah, he fails to kill himself in the future, and that leads to the movie kind of happening, right? So
Yes. That is
yeah,
sort of, yeah, that is what happens to cause everything else to happen. So yeah, that's the basic premise of Looper. Thumbs up, and now I think we'll get into spoilers. So
yeah, spoilers. I mean,
okay.
we're kind of still far away from spoilers, to be honest. Like this is still like maybe 20 minutes into the movie.
Yes.
I guess now is the time to talk about telekinesis, though.
Yeah, telekinesis is interesting. I think it's one of those neat ideas that it's almost like not entirely necessary for the movie to happen. You could make this
Mm-hmm.
movie without having the TK element. It's just another like futury thing, and it's kind of
Yeah.
sold well enough, probably because it's used so sparingly until like
Mm-hmm.
the end. Like it's
Yeah.
sold well enough to us that I kind of buy it. Like when it's first introduced to you in the movie, it's again still very early on, and it's Joe's one friend whose name I do not remember what the character's name is.
It's played by Paul Dano. He's a Paul Dano is in a lot of great. He's a really good actor, and
Mm-hmm.
he's in like Swiss Army Man. He's in There Will Be Blood, to name two movies. And yeah, he plays a very fun like I really like him in like that kind of side character, like kind of, you know, supporting role a lot of the time is what
Yeah,
he's in.
he
I mean,
does
Swiss Army
good.
Man, he's kind of the main character, but
But
um,
he's another looper, and he also has this TK mutation that apparently about 10% of the population have, where you can
mhm.
move things with your mind. However, by move things with your mind, it's basically limited to like extremely small objects.
Yeah,
Like
they
they can,
basically it's like a throwaway like party gag, you know.
yeah, it's like the
Like
least useful form of telekinesis you could
yeah.
have.
People are like, "Oh my goodness, in the movie, oh man, we're going to get superpowers and like crazy people." But nah, it's just like this little thing you can kind of spin a quarter like 6 inches above your hand, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's
Which is not all it is necessarily, but
that's all it seems to be at first.
mhm.
And it
I mean
is
it's yeah.
it's cool. It's also like a little bit like when it was first introduced, I'm like, how are they going to use this? Because I was a little concerned, because I was just like, like we already have a movie about time travel, and now you're also going to throw at me like there's also this like ability to levitate things that, you know, people just suddenly have. 10% of the population just suddenly has the ability to, you know, move small objects with their mind. Like, okay, like fine, like I'll accept it. Because, and again, what I think works about it, the reason why like it didn't throw me off too much, is that they kind of show it, they establish it exists, but it's kind of a lame party trick, and then it's pretty much barely shown again until like the like when you're getting towards the climax of the movie, and then it kind of shows up again, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a thing, and they're like, oh, but it seems to be a little bit more useful now.
Yeah, that's like the real Chekhov's gun is, oh, telekinesis. Now we'll just kind of put that away for a while. So yes. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it is pretty throwaway, and they didn't really need it as like it hardly factors at all, but it's like you said, it's a fun little sci-fi thing, I guess. It kind of establishes a more future-y, you know, like thing for the movie to just kind of pivot around. It makes a more credible threat, like feel more credible later on, I guess, when maybe be its best like movie-ish moment. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in, like, yeah, telekinesis. Don't forget about it.
Yeah, don't forget TK.
Yeah. We also, like, so kind of in the movie plot, though, so yeah, you kind of get this general rundown of what's going on, and then we are introduced to our general characters. So you have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, you have Paul Dano as this other Looper friend. You kind of see, like, there's a guy from the future who's played by Jeff Daniels.
Yes.
Pretty fun, pretty good performance.
I like Jeff Daniels in this movie. Honestly, I like I feel like there's not an actor in this movie that does a bad job, pretty much.
Yeah, I would agree for sure.
Everyone did a good job. I liked pretty much every character and the role that they were supposed to be for the most part. So even like the little boy is actually like relatively good at
He's solid, yeah.
I mean, that probably is helped by the fact that they make him like a creepy little boy, so he doesn't have to be.
He's got something going on for sure. Yeah. But it's a little spooky when he wants to be, but
yes.
Yeah, like you kind of see immediately like the big consequence of not closing your loop. So Paul Dano's character Seth, kind of in the first, like, you kind of get the establishing stuff, and then the first like actual moment is you see his character, like, he kind of bursts into Joseph Gordon-Levitt's apartment, and it's
he comes in through
you got to help me. Yep. Yeah. Like, and he failed to close his loop, and he is now like being hunted by the future cops. And this is our first introduction, I think, to Jeff Daniels' character. Like, he takes, like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt hides him. He has this little safe where he's been hiding all, like, he's trying to hold like some of his silver, like kind of his
half
like,
of
little
all his
extra, you know, money, so that he can maybe, you know, try to go hide or do something with it.
I think that his idea is just, you know, he's going to be smart for his retirement, I guess. He's going to have a lot of money. And so, yeah, he saves half of his silver. He's got giant stash just chilling under his floor.
Sitting under his floor. So he is very reluctant to help Seth, the friend character, and, like, but he kind of reluctantly hides him, and it gets taken, like, Joe gets taken into the mob headquarters, and he basically is told, hey, either you're going to give up your friend or you're going to give up your gold, your silver, you know? And it's like, man.
And he sells them out for 30 pieces of silver.
That's,
I mean, more than 30.
Very biblical, yes. Yeah. But, I mean, it's probably equivalent, like, if you think about, you know,
the inflation,
like, silver is pretty valuable. Yeah, inflation maybe, 30 pieces of silver, and Bible times, or
I don't know. You know. It sounds like a lot of money. Maybe it wasn't a lot of money. But
I mean, these are pretty big bars of silver, though. So you know.
These are large bars.
I mean, it's probably
you have a good time with these silver bars, but
oh yeah. And he and that's the thing, though. Like you see, he's pretty heartless. Like, you know, he gives up his friend, and it is really brutal. Like what goes on. So
we see the future version of his friend trying to get away, and all of a sudden, like, he has and this is, again, the interesting part of time travel in this movie is that, like, you could go, like, well, if you did something to the past version, Wouldn't that have just been the case for that character's entire life? But it doesn't work like that in this movie, and the fact that they try to keep it consistent, like, kind of does a good enough job selling it. But yeah, so he's climbing over the fence, sees like a mark on his wrist,
little arrow.
An arrow, a scar in the shape of an arrow on his wrist. Pulls back his sleeve, and it's like, be at this address in 15 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's missing a finger, and then he's missing another finger, and you realize they're like, torturing and like basically chopping bits off
younger, the 30-year-old or the 30 years younger version of himself.
Yes. Yeah. And so he's it's kind of a graphic and terrifying scene because he's like making his way back to the place as fast as he can, but also like they're just like going at it. Like they're not really giving this guy an opportunity at all to like.
It does not feel like 15 minutes has passed at all. No.
And also like you think that like you'd be like, all right, maybe he doesn't get the idea. Like chop off his pinky finger, and then give him another like 5 or 10 minutes, and just be like, all right,
even like 20 or 30. Like that's the big thing is like, okay, obviously this character has a ton of like he's getting mutilated, right? But it's like you never really understand, and they don't really go into a whole lot like the long-lasting ramifications of staying too long in the past, right?
Yeah.
And I guess they kind of set it up for the end, like being a big... We just don't really see it come to fruition. Like, you only see maybe 2 or 3 scenes in the future, and, like, they're pretty limited and mostly in flashback form as well. It's like, it's not like... But obviously, you don't really know what's going on.
Obviously, it's not that much of a problem to, like, send Jeff Daniels to the past, because,
That's what's weird, yeah. And he seems to be further from the future than even like, so yeah, Joe's future self comes back as well. And Bruce Willis is around for like a couple, like at least a week even, probably like 3 or 4 days, maybe minimum.
Yeah, he's around for a good amount of time. So
yeah. And yeah, but then you have this other future guy. It's just like, well, maybe he didn't exist then, so it's like okay that he's there. I was also just kind of thinking about like how the loopers initially were created, because like in the future they just start sending people to the past before they know that they'll actually get killed, necessarily,
Yeah, they have to figure out a way to communicate like with the people in the past first.
So like presumably like, the guy from the future has all of like every single, like kind of like the almanac from Back to the Future, like he knows all the times that all the loopers are being sent, or all the people to be murdered are being sent back,
which would be hard to do because it seems like this is a thing that's been happening for a long time. So it's like you really have a hit list that I'm guessing there's an ongoing.
Spans,
I feel like there
years.
must be an ongoing communication with the future. I don't think.
Yeah, I guess you can probably send objects back. Yeah,
you could send like a notebook.
That makes
and
sense.
Just be like, this guy's gonna show up at this time.
Here's the next week of people we need to be looped or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. The Seth like gets absolutely like his nose and like a lot, like he is no longer human, almost, like very much paraplegic with,
he's like tortured to the point where he's unrecognizable. His nose gets cut off, his face is like mutilated.
His face is mutilated. His feet, he has like maybe
hands,
1 leg or 1 arm or
just
something.
Brutal. Everything they do to him, and then
that's what we're trying to avoid.
The old man drags himself like finally gets to the place where he's supposed to be, like barely making it. And the door opens, and one of the Gatmen just like immediately shoots him in the head. Yeah. And that is how that goes.
Yeah. So not a desirable outcome.
Right. And then I don't know if like they then just have to keep the younger version of him in like stasis now for 30 years to then send him. Like that's like an interesting question, is how that's gonna work.
I mean, it's like his failure for not, like killing his future self. Like he just didn't do it. But yeah, it's pretty scary stuff.
Because we know time changes and isn't really constant in this movie. But also, it seems to be all the same timeline, too. It's sort of a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey thing happening.
Yeah.
And so we
see...
That's
like... Yeah, they immediately hand-wave it, and I feel like, it's...
Because when we first see, then, when we see Joe... So now we've been shown the consequences of failing to kill or failing to close your loop is what they call it when you kill your future self. So we know the consequences. So that's good. Like, it's good the movie takes the time to like sort of set up the world a little bit and then show us the consequences of not following the rules of the world. Yeah. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt is at the place, and all of a sudden Guy warps in front of him, but it's a little bit different because he's not tied up, and also he doesn't have a hood on, so you can see his actual head. And it's like, oh, that's not how this goes down. And of course, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is taken back by this, and he doesn't just immediately shoot him like he does with pretty much everyone else. Like, pretty much every other time we see him not closing a loop, but killing a guy from the future, it's like, poof, pops into existence in front of him, and then like a half second later just gets blown away. Like, that's just pretty much how they do things. In this particular instance, he pops into existence. He doesn't have, the headwear on, and so he's understandably a little like freaked out, and he realizes, I think, they kind of make eye contact, and I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like, oh, that's like me in the future.
Yeah.
And then he's actually going to kill himself. His friend, the reason why he didn't close his loop is because like he is unwilling to kill his future self. He can't bring himself to do it. He's actually, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like willing to do it now, like even though he's seen, like it gives him a little bit of hesitation to be like, what the, heck is going on here? Yeah. But he's willing to do it, and he breaks through his little moment of shock and brings his gun back up, but future Joe turns around. He's got all the gold bars on his back, and he takes the shotgun blast in the gold bars, which would totally work. I mean, it's a shotgun. It's not like a super penetrative object, and they're pretty hefty bars of gold. So, I mean, that would totally be fine. And so he takes the shot in the back, and then he chucks. I love that he then chucks one of the gold bars at him.
It's such a beautiful, like there's a nice, like, widescreen shot of that action sequence where it's like he gets shot, and it's like, from 40 feet away. He gets shot, he, like, grabs the bar, throws it at him, and Joseph is just like, oh my goodness, I get hit in the face. What am I gonna do? And, like, he just looks absolutely ridiculous. Like, it's a pretty, like, unrealistic scene, because, like, wow, you really got rattled by that, I guess, because you were reeling pretty heavily. And then he runs up to him and just like slaps him in the face, and he just falls over. Yeah, and he's like unconscious for like 8 hours too.
Yeah, the amount of time he's out is that's probably the most unrealistic part of that.
It's like 11:30 in the morning, and then he's out till like sunset, basically. Yeah, it's like, wow. I mean, admittedly, he was pretty high on their drug, so like maybe
maybe we don't know the full effects.
But, yeah. But he does have a withdrawal scene later, which is also interesting. But
yeah, future Joe takes his gun and his truck and drives off, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's on a mission. So yeah, future Joe is like set up to have like this. Leaves the United States, goes off to China. It's kind of a fun little sequence of like young Joe is interacting with Abe from the future, and he's like, young Joe has been learning French, like he's going to move to France or something, and the future Jeff Bridges is like, hey, why are you learning French?
You should go to China.
You should really learn Chinese.
Like, I'm going to France.
And he's like, I'm learning French.
I'm from the future. You should go to China.
Which is just like a fun little thing. And then, but it's also, he goes to China, and you kind of see this all in flashback. Like, he goes to China, and he's just this hitman for the mob there, and like doing all these heists and living this crazy lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we see he's living large, but he's quickly running out of money. All that money he saved up doesn't last as long as he thought, especially when you're partying budgeted. Like that. Mm-hmm. And then so then he has to become like a hitman for the mob, and we see him like shooting people and robbing people and doing criminal stuff. And then
eventually he meets the woman.
Yes, he meets the woman who straightens him out, and they get married, and they're living several years happily together.
I think it's like 5 or 6 maybe. Like they kind of do like the 4 years until like 24 years since he's killed himself basically. And then he
this is the version of Joe that did kill himself, because we actually
see
that version of events transpire. And and he just kills himself while he's all tied up. In that version, he has the sack over his head, and then he meets this woman. He's in love with her, and eventually 30 years later, the mobsters show up. They drag him off, and he decides he can't do this for reasons that are revealed to be basically the mobsters show up, and this is an interesting point. The mobsters show up, hold him at gunpoint, which was a little confusing to me because I'm like, I thought the whole point of this loop thing was that you can't kill people in the future, or not that you can't, but that you can't get away with it because for some reason, I don't know, forensics, you leave blood or whatever on the scene, like you're going to get caught, like forensics technology is just too good. But so like, why would future gangsters even carry lethal weapons if that was the case?
They have a really strong like taser gun as well.
Yeah, we see them use the taser a few seconds later. So like, why wouldn't they just all have that if you can't get away with killing people? Is sort of the whole premise of the movie, that you can't get away with killing people in the future. Because if you could get away with killing people in the future, even if it was difficult, like presumably you would still just do that, then come up with some whole convoluted time travel thing that you have to do to dispose of the people that you don't like. But anyway, so
that is an unfortunate like kind of major plot hole because like his future wife gets shot as well.
Yes, she gets shot and killed by the gangsters. So it's like, wait a second.
I don't know if she actually dies, but like it's
see
pretty
her
clear.
Yeah.
She's got a pretty bad gut wound and stuff. So
maybe future medicine,
it's
they're
presumed dead.
Her out,
presumed dead. Yeah. So that's unfortunate for her, I guess.
So Bruce Willis resolves that he will not allow this to happen in the future. He's like. He's like, you're going to see, like, because of the stupid decisions you made, like, this is what happens to the woman that saves your miserable life, or some line like that. And, he's trying to save his future wife, and that's, like, his whole mission is he's gonna do whatever he has to do to save his future wife. And how does he have to decide that he needs to do that? Well... So he's
got to kill the person who's closing the loops.
Yes, he's got to kill the new boss that is closing the loops.
The Rainmaker. Very, very spooky name. He's this crazy, like, mysterious figure that nobody knows what's going on. But all the loopers in the future, because, they're friends and stuff, like they're coworkers in the past, they all know, like, kind of what the deal is. They've been in communication about like, okay, well, who is this guy? Let's try to figure out who he is. And eventually they get enough information that they're able to figure out a date and like just a bunch of random numbers, which turns out to be a date and a hospital. So they kind of put it's actually a date and a hospital, and they put 2 and 2 together, and it's like, okay, this must be the birth, like this is the hospital where they were born and the date that they were born. Which is, I think it's like July 15th or something.
Yes.
So there you go.
Quite close to today, actually.
I know, right? We're talking about this, well, sometime in July.
Yes. And not that it's really that much of a dox to say what day we recorded on, but yeah, we're recording on...
you don't want to date your podcast.
I guess not, right? Yeah, we're recording on a July day of some year. So anyway,
it could be any time.
The publishing date of the video might give it away, but there are 3 people who were born in that hospital on that day. Bruce Willis decides he has to kill all 3 of them just to be sure.
They're all like 8-year-old kids, by the way, which is pretty dark. This movie was a lot more rated R than I thought it was going to be. You get a lot of,
and the fact is that, so Bruce Willis decides he has to kill all these children because one of them's the Rainmaker, and in doing so, he decides, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to lay this all out here. So he's going around, he's going to kill all these kids in the hopes that, like, if he kills the Rainmaker, then the Rainmaker never becomes the mob boss and never decides to close the loops. And then he will, like, presumably just snap back, I guess, to being...
because, like, the future that was his no longer exists, so then he himself will then jump back to his own time, because he will never have been looped or sent back to time, like sent back to that time.
Which the way this movie handles paradoxes is basically like when you do something, it has the effect, but like everything up to that point still happened is kind of
like
what
when
it
you're
seems
when you're
like.
in the past, like the future is a cloud. Like you don't know what's necessarily going to happen. So like, and that creates some pretty fun scenes. Like what young Joe knows, future Joe will know basically when it happens.
Yes.
He doesn't know it before it will happen because it hasn't happened yet. But as soon as it does happen, then his memory will become clear, and then it will have happened.
His memory is almost like in a state of flux, where he like kind of remembers like what happened to him in like his timeline, but then it's like changing and overwriting and stuff.
Which
like
is
that.
really spooky because his whole motivation is this woman, and there's like a couple of scenes where he's like, what was the first thing that I saw? Like, when did I first meet her? Like, how can I remember her face? And he's like having this crisis of, you know, like, I can't remember. Like, what is this younger version of me doing that is changing this future outcome, right? Because some of his memories are still clear, and one of them is like she does get shot. So like, it's pretty like, don't think about it too much. This is, you know, time travel wibbly wobbly, like you say.
Yes. Young Joe, he gets a piece of his map, so he knows where one of the kids is, and it's like in a farmhouse basically. And so young Joe goes to the farmhouse, and he's like, I'm gonna protect this farm, because young Joe still wants to close his loop. He wants to prove that like he's you know, not a screw up or whatever.
Also like, because there's, if we should talk about like they have this initial meeting, and he, you know, they like when he first jumps back in time, Bruce Willis like disarms him, knocks him out. So like he kind of returns to his apartment for some reason because he's an idiot.
He wants to get all his money.
Obviously, the mob knows that, like, I guess that makes sense, but it's still like, okay, come on, dude. Like,
it's also interesting,
you know, what happens.
How quickly the mob knows that he didn't close his loop. They seem to be right on the ball about this.
Yeah, they kind of set up like, oh, at the end of the day, you kind of turn in your silver, and that's how you.
But like, if Joe, like, let's say like he was tired, and he's like, I've got enough cash on me, I'm just gonna bring these 4 bars home, and like I'll turn them in tomorrow. Would they have like come breaking down his door like, why didn't you turn in your silver today, boy?
I mean, I would guess yes. They kind of set that up, you know, like they are very easily, like when he was hiding his friend, like they're very quick to just barge in,
and they're also very good. They're also fine with him keeping half of his silver, like he's just storing up half of it.
I think they don't necessarily know how much like take there is on each individual person.
I guess like I think there is a line with when he's the smart thing to do if he didn't get knocked out and was asleep for like 8 hours would probably have been immediately go back to his apartment, you know, if not too much time had passed, grab a couple silver bars from his stash, and then just show up to the place like nothing had happened and turn him in for money. Like, because then they'd just be like, oh yeah, here's Joe, he's, you know, cashing 2 silver bars like he always does because he, you know, presumably keeps some. Like, and that's just how it is. Like, probably, like, maybe no one would be the wiser in that situation.
But presumably they know that he was supposed to close his loop today. Like, they only give him the time that the thing will happen.
Maybe, but does like
Jeff
everyone
Daniels
know?
should know.
Jeff Daniels, like if Jeff Daniels gets an
knows.
update, maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a complicated.
It's one of those things that doesn't really matter. Like, it's not that important for the film, you know, as a whole.
Yeah.
But like, it's just one of those little things that it's like, man, I wish we kind of got a better answer for this. I guess that's kind of the Rian Johnson touch, perhaps, of being a little unsatisfying at times, you know.
Yes. He wants to subvert our expectations, which
they kind
of do in this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
But Joe sets up shop. He's going to protect the kid. He knows that his older self is coming for him eventually. But he doesn't.
Before this happens, though, even they have a really great scene where, like we've pre-established like how cutting yourself and scarring and works. So he does that to himself, and there's a little like, oh, did the guys get him or not? And it turns out, nope. He drew the arrow and then writes down the name of the bar that. We've established that every time he kills a loop,
server of the bar at the bar.
It's a pretty funny joke where Bruce Willis is like, wow, you that must really hurt really bad, you know. He's like, yeah, it kind of does. You know, there's another waitress that works here. Her name is shorter.
Less letters.
Less letters.
Yeah.
He's like, that would have been nice to remember. Yep.
Yeah.
So that was a good little joke. But that whole scene is really fun. They're just sitting in the diner, kind of sizing each other up and looking at each other. And this is kind of where we get a lot of our, like, don't worry about the time travel exposition. Like, I think the line is like, we could be talking all day about this and, like, pulling out, like, you know, straws to try to figure out what time travel means and how it works. It's not important. Like, that was the final point, you know.
The point is we're here now and we have to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they have their meeting. It goes poorly. The GAC guys show up. They try to kill old Bruce Willis. So does young Joe, tries to kill old Joe. And then they also, the GAC guys try to kill young Joe eventually too.
Well, I don't think they want it. See, that's the other problem with, like, they have a very, very trigger finger bad guys of, like you said, in the future they kill the wife when, like, they're not really supposed to, and then in the past it's like, well, you don't want to kill the past person,
you just want to kill the future.
You just want to cripple them, or, you know, take
or
them hostage as a leverage.
You don't even have to hurt
so it's like,
them.
but if
In
you
theory,
kill them,
you could just keep
then
them
that seems like a
captive for
huge
little
paradox.
bit. Yeah,
but it seems like a huge paradox. Like,
exactly.
Ultimately, you don't have to torture them. It's just they do because they're serious about, you know, getting the old version.
But even torturing them would still, like, if you cripple a dude to the point where he can't even, like, function on his own in the world anymore, like, wouldn't that still create a giant paradox of, like, well, now this guy basically can't do any of the things that he was supposed to do?
Just remember the line. We can talk about it all day.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Paul. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So the point being, though, they have this fun, like, it's probably my favorite scene of the movie is them just talking and, like, you know, just reminiscing. Like, he's like, the young Joe is like, what the heck did you do to do this? And old Joe is, like, trying to explain to him, like, this is the reason that we're doing this. Like, you would eventually do this in my position as well. But they can't quite come to an understanding, but also the mob finds them, and they have to escape. So young Joe gets one of the addresses, like you said, and he goes and plants himself at this fun random farm, and that's where we meet Emily Blunt's character, who is her character's name is Sarah, and she's the mother of this interesting, quirky boy, and they're just kind of holed up in this farm and living their life. Yeah. Very interesting, isn't it? Why would this person be a target on the paper?
And so we kind of see some interaction there. We learn this little kid is very, very smart. He makes Joe a little, out of some of his, like, electronic toys, he makes Joe a little, like, kind of communicator thing. It's not overly complicated. It's not like something stupid where he makes, like, a working radio or something. Like, that would be in a dumber movie. He's like, I took apart my toys and I reassembled them into a 32-bit encryption radio device. Like, it's instead it's just like, no, these are two little toys, and, like, when you press on the one, the light comes on the other, and so we can use it to,
he's got some basic, wiring, probably some soldering knowledge. Like,
and so, like, it's just like, this is a simple way to communicate with each other. If the light comes on, you know that you're signaling the other person. So, pretty basic, but also, like, a lot more advanced than you'd expect, like, a 5 or 6 year old to be. So...
Which is how old the actor was in the production period, by the way. He was like 6 years old, which is pretty cool because he does a pretty bang-up job. Like, he's fairly, like, he comes off as precocious at times, but he's also, like, very terrifying as well.
Yes.
So that's pretty good, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure. No, the kid actor was pretty good for the role he was cast in. I guess it's, like, that perfect age where, like, they don't have an ego yet. I remember in some of my film classes talking about working with children. The general rule was just don't. But
good rule of thumb, yeah.
Yeah, if you had to, they said teenagers were the worst because they have, like, you know, an ego and they want to seem cool. Like, little kids, like, they can maybe be hard to corral because, you know, they're easily excitable and stuff. Yeah. But, like, if you can actually get them to do what you're asking them to do, like, apparently they're usually better because they're just they're just there to like, you just have to make it into like a game for them almost. Like, we're going to play at making a movie today. As opposed to teenagers, which are like, you know, too caught up with themselves and basically like, I gotta be like a cool movie star in this scene and overact. Mm-hmm. So
I feel like it's also like, I mean, yeah, just talk about acting and stuff. Like, yeah, you really want somebody, like when you're getting a kid, they kind of just need to be like, they need to be cute, they need to deliver their lines, and that's about it. As little, you know, pivotal stuff as possible, right?
Right.
So like, and I think he does a bang up job doing that, and like, but most of that whole sequence, and that's kind of like the first half of the movie is like setting up this big, you know, it's very interesting. Like the first half of the movie takes place in like the city, and you see all this crazy stuff going down. Like yeah, there's a really fun sequence at the beginning where he's doing his looper stuff. Like you just see him killing and killing and killing and killing. He has like this really fancy pocket watch and stuff, like, you know, to keep track of when they're going to appear so he can murder them at exactly the right time. But that all is like, he's just in this kind of spiral of like, you know, drugs and this lifestyle that is very, very, you know, unsustainable that we see. And then you take a step back and they're on this little farm in the middle of, you know, nowhere, Kansas or Nebraska or whatever. And all of a sudden, like, all of that just gets pulled away, and it's like, okay, now we're watching Emily Blunt as this mother who's trying to corral this very, very troubled, like she's very scared of her son for some reason, and also like very like she just doesn't, like he doesn't call her mom, he calls her Sarah and stuff, and it's like this pulling back to like, oh, this is the family and this is the farm and this is so much different from the city, which I think is a really cool comparison of like, here's like all this like extravagance and depravity and stuff, and then you come out and it's in this farm. Like, it's just a very fun little separation that I kind of noticed there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, what did you think of like, you're just kind of taking a step back? What do you think of all that?
I mean, I like the whole situation. I like the setup of the world that, yeah, it's like impoverished and everyone's having a hard time, and it's a depressing look on the future, but like, you know, the other option, I guess, is just to make it like, I guess there's lots of directions you can go with the future, but like, this is a way to make it seem you're making a movie about crime, so it makes sense to have it be like, you know, an impoverished area of the future, even if maybe in general, maybe the rest of the world's great, but like this particular area is economically depressed. So
yeah,
and then
it's a very like very country setting, which I also like.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have the contrast of going to the city and then also you're out in the
like the Gatman or all these like cowboys and stuff. They have these big long black dusters and like cowboy
they all
hats.
have giant revolvers. If we want to get a little bit into the gun talk, I like that they made them all like that, but it again makes the idea of like, these guys are really just like, they're enforcers, but they're probably not actually meant to use their guns most of the time. It's really, and you could say they're criminals, so it's like, yeah, ideally you actually don't want to murder that many people, because even in today's world, or presumably even in this particular future, like, murdering people is complicated and messy. I remember seeing like an interview with an actual like former mob guy once, and like they were talking about like, so did you kill a bunch of people? And he's like, well, I can't really, you know, I don't want to really say whether or not I was involved in, you know, any particular situations, but like, really, like, you try to avoid killing people as much as possible. He's like, killing people is really messy. Like, it gets a lot more attention than, like, you know, just, like, figuring out a way that doesn't involve murdering someone. Like, you know, you have to get rid of a body. Like, there's a lot more police interest. And, like, you know, if they hear someone got, like, shook up for some money, like, they're probably going to be like, that's too bad, I guess. But, like, if someone gets murdered, they're probably going to be all over that trying to figure out who murdered them. So, I mean, it makes sense that, you know, you'd probably go for more of an intimidation thing than anything else. And, you know, giant revolvers, I guess, are somewhat intimidating. Practically, giant revolvers are not the gun that, like, anyone should want to have anymore. So we can attribute some of the bad marksmanship in this movie to that's just because that's not a gun that's easy to shoot, and most of these guys probably wouldn't be able to shoot particularly straight with them. And then there's the one guy that they specifically say like, this guy is, you know, the most accurate shot with a gat I've ever seen, but they deal with him in a different way.
Yeah, they?
Yes. We do see they have like an armory that has a lot more practical firearms in it.
Yeah.
But most of the gat guys they carry these. They actually call them gats, but they're just these giant rollers. I don't know exactly what model they are because I'm not a revolver guy. But they're gigantic, you know, presumably like a 44 Magnum or like maybe a 500 Smith & Wesson even. Like they're very big revolvers that they're all just like rolling
There's
around
an
with.
early moment in the film where this kind of really like, you know, slimy, gross, like big on himself, very narcissistic Gatman. He calls himself Kid Blue. Is like, wow, look at you with your dumb little like, you know, blunderbuss or whatever. I got me this revolver. I can, you know, shoot the wings off a dragonfly. And he's just completely pathetic the whole film, and it's hilarious. Like, he's just this absolutely worthless, you know.
There's actually
like,
a scene that I'm curious.
Guy.
I'm curious. I feel like this must have just happened while they were filming. Like, there's no way it was scripted. Joe is shooting at his older self as he's running away with a gat, and runs out of ammo, and he, like, in frustration just throws the gun at the ground, and it sticks in the ground barrel first with like the cylinder and the handle just up in the air. And I'm like,
really?
That must have just happened. Like, there's no way that they scripted that. Like, he threw it at the dirt and it just stuck in the dirt barrel first. Like,
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
It's a fun
you only see
moment.
it for a couple seconds, but I mean, that's the only thing that could have happened there because the gun's just sticking up in the air inexplicably. So it's kind of fun that happened. It's like, you know, it's like the Breaking Bad pizza throw. It's like it just happened that is
it's
like
just one of those
the
moments,
most perfect way that could have happened, and it just worked out that way. So worked pretty good. Like you go back and watch that pizza throw and you think it must be fake because it's so perfect the way it just lands like that, but it's like, no, that's just literally how it happened. So
yeah.
But
yeah.
do we want to just dive into, I mean, we're almost an hour in, so we just want to like kind of barrel through the ending of the movie here, or
yeah, sure, we can kind of wrap it up pretty quick here.
So
do
you want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. So we see Joe is kind of hunkered down, creating these relationships with Emily Blunt and her son. And while they're doing that, you're kind of following old Joe as he tries to hunt down this future, you know, mob boss, the Rainmaker. And we see him like very, very much reluctantly, but still actually doing, like, you know, murdering children. He only murders one that we see, but like he's going around trying to close off, you know, any of these possibilities. Very Terminator-esque, and but in a very human way of like he's not about it. And eventually he does get captured by the mob, and that was another weird kind of thing is like, why didn't they just immediately murder him?
Yeah,
I guess it was kind of like a pride thing, because I think Jeff Daniels, or actually it was Kid Blue, the really pathetic Gat guy, gets fired.
The only reason is because it was Kid Blue, and he wants to bring him in to just show that he's actually a badass,
like competent. But then he absolutely isn't, which is just hilarious.
And it's also a setup it's a setup for two things. One, it's the setup for Bruce Willis to have a Bruce Willis action hero scene where he murders everyone with machine guns, which is fun.
Yep. He goes in and rains hell on the mob.
Turns out
you
bring Bruce Willis into a room
which is hilarious.
Full of mob guys. He's going to just end up disarming one of them and then just killing everybody. So that's cool. And then,
he does it very efficiently. Oh, yeah.
Yes. And then it also helps to set up young Joe for a motivation, because Bruce Willis is basically like, hey, like, I killed everybody. Like, no one's coming for you anymore. And it's like,
just let me go murder this kid.
And it's an interesting point, because now it's that young Joe is protecting the kid because he feels like he has to protect this young child. And it's the interesting question of like, because he knows from what old Joe's told him that apparently this kid's going to grow up to be like a horrible person. But also it's like, it's almost like the would you kill baby Hitler question. And it's like, as much as it sounds tempting, like, no, like, you shouldn't kill baby Hitler, because baby Hitler isn't the Hitler that, we know yet. And so it's like, you're actually just killing an innocent baby that actually hasn't done anything yet. So it's like, why, like, time, if you're supposing the possibility of time travel, that means there's the possibility for change. And so it's like, well, then we can't actually kill this guy because his fate is not set, and maybe it'll be different now that, like, some slight change has been introduced, and we shouldn't kill innocent life. We can't do the Minority Report thing where we're like, well, we're pretty sure they're gonna murder someone at some point in the future, so let's lock them up now. It's like, no, that's not really how the justice system should work. So
yeah, very like Minority Report kind of idea. That's another fun little pseudo time travel. That's I guess, but
premonition.
Not really. Premonition.
Yeah.
So old Joe, like, he murders all the mob people. He does it very well because he's Bruce Willis, and Bruce Willis gets stuff done.
He gets 2 P90s and just goes to town,
just
killing
goes to
people.
Town.
I do
just
like
hip firing all the way.
The P90 would have been a much more effective weapon to give to all those GAT guys, and also still could have been easily concealed under their giant trench coats. But
maybe they carried more stuff. We don't really know.
But we only ever really see them carrying. Like, one of them has like an auto loader, but most of them seem to have just these giant revolvers. But then, if we gave them all P90s, then Joseph Gordon-Levitt would probably have just gotten killed in like 2.5 seconds. So that's probably not a good idea for the sake of the movie happening. I mean, no complaints there. P90s, cool enough gun. I mean, I think there's a little bit of like very large magazine syndrome happening in that scene, but like not to the point where it's too horrible and like distracting. Yeah. And the P90 does have a 50-round magazine, in fairness. I actually have gotten an opportunity to shoot a real full auto P90 once.
Oh, wow.
And it did definitely have that feeling of like, that it is funny because it's like, it's a machine gun. It still goes fast, but like that 50-round magazine does make it last a little bit longer than like, I had shot Thompsons with stick mags before. I've never gotten to shoot a Thompson with a drum mag, just stick mags. And I'd shot an M4 before that. I'd shot an MP5 before that. So I had a bit of experience with machine guns before shooting the P90, and all those like 30-round mags, they go pretty quick, and the 50, that really does actually give you a little bit of like, oh, this thing is still shooting. Like, I would have expected it to run out of ammo a little bit ago, but we're still going. That being said, the P90 sucks. I mean, it's cool. It's cool for the application that it's meant for, which is like highly concealable submachine gun PDW that shoots a cool bullet that can theoretically shoot through Kevlar body armor. But like, just if you need a submachine gun, unless you need it to be like a relatively concealable weapon, which I guess is what a submachine gun is sort of for, but like, if you can get away with concealing an MP5, just conceal an MP5, because like the MP5 is the gun. Yeah. It is just it's the submachine gun. Like, and there's like a couple things where it doesn't have a bolt catch. Like, I guess like if you gave the MP5 a bolt catch, you could make it like a little bit better. But like, the MP5 is just so good. Like, and it's such a fun gun to shoot, and it shoots so good. Like, the MP5 is the closest thing I've ever shot that feels like it's a machine gun, but it feels like a laser beam. Like, that's how I can describe how good the recoil on an MP5 feels. Like, even though it's a machine gun, it's just like, was so easy to hold that thing on target. Like, it was really impressive. I was not expecting it to be that easy. And I think I got to put 3 magazines through the MP5, and it was a lot of fun. We do actually see Bruce Willis pick up an MP5 later on in that same scene. That might be a little like Die Hard, nod there, like, but
I think we can assume, it almost certainly is.
Yeah, and so he uses the MP5 to finish off the last of the gangsters, which is fun. Or actually, I think does he use a revolver or something? I can't remember what he actually uses.
he finishes off all the gangsters. So the point being, there's no longer any threat, wink wink, towards young Joe, and he is free to let old Joe finish his task. But all during this time, and kind of the reason that old Joe is very he figured everybody kind of learns who the Rain Man is. So one of the Gat Men called Jesse, a very cowboy character, strolls up to the farm and causes young Joe to kind of hide and try to make himself scarce. And he goes through the house and is introduced to the whole family. And at one point, he basically figures out that they are there, right?
Yes.
He figures out that Emily Blunt has been hiding young Joe. So he leaves that day, but returns the next day and catches them, basically hiding this fugitive, right? And that is where we really see how powerful Emily Blunt's son, Sid, really is. He is an absolute terror, like, with telekinesis. He is
see Emily
the TK.
Blunt doing a little bit of TK before this, so we go, okay, Emily Blunt is TK.
And she's, like, throwing a lighter very aggressively.
Yes.
Like, she's really whipping it around.
So we know that she's already more powerful than, like, any other TK person we've seen in the movie up to this point. And then this is her son, and, I mean, we don't know who the father is, but maybe he was also TK. I don't know.
I actually have a theory on that I'm going to toss out at the end.
All right, you can, whenever you feel ready then. But anyway, so we see, Jesse returns. Jesse he gets spooked by the little boy and briefly points his gun at him. This displeases. Jesse realizes, he's just a kid right away, and he immediately, like, points his gun somewhere else.
Yep.
He doesn't want to.
He's an honorable thief.
Yes,
or hitman.
Honorable hitman, and it is too late though. Little kid has been freaked out by having a giant revolver in his face for a second, and Emily Blunt starts running, and you think it's because she's like going to go to
Sid
the
slips
boy.
on the stairs to like catch him. Yep.
Yeah, and you think it's gonna be to help Sid, but really she's like tackling young Joe out the door of the house, and you're like, wait a second, and basically just everything in the house gets like flung around, and Jesse gets like literally like
disintegrated,
torn apart. Yeah,
by telekinetic powers.
Yeah, so this little boy is the most powerful TK presumably to ever live at this time. So,
and it's very, very much implied that he will become the Rainmaker.
Yes,
like very clearly. So immediately, as soon as young Joe knows this, old Joe knows this as well, and so I think it's just after that he gets taken into the mob and stuff. But then he knows he's on a beeline to
he's got to
the
go
farm,
kill this
which
kid.
he already knows where it is because young Joe obviously knows where it is.
Yeah,
he's on his way. So then we kind of come to the climax of the movie where old Joe arrives at the farm. This is like literally right after Jesse is disintegrated. Like old Joe, young Joe is like, get your family, like get your kid, throw some stuff in the car and get the hell out of here. Right.
Yeah.
And he walks down the road to confront old Joe, who is like drives up and kind of lays it down. He's like, hey, just let me walk by. This is all your silver, all your gold. Nobody's coming after you. I murdered all the mob people.
You can live your life.
It's time to walk away.
Yep.
Yeah. And young Joe's like, dude, you gotta I'm not able to put into good words, but like he clearly he has bonded with these characters, with Emily Blunt. They have a love scene, and stuff. So like they're clearly, very like he has made his like intentions well known, and he's like, I can't let this future come to pass where like, all this terrible stuff is gonna go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, actually, really. That's kind of a bad way of putting it, because he doesn't really care about the future. Like, he only cares about the now, young Joe. Like, he's very grounded in that way, which is kind of cool. Like, he's very, very dismissive of the old Joe.
He tells him at one point, like, do what old men do and, like, lay down and die.
Just lay down and die. Yeah. Such a good line. But they have this confrontation. Of course, the pathetic Gatman, he didn't actually get killed in the...
What's funny is, what is his motivation anymore? Because
his boss is dead. He's an idiot.
I guess, yeah.
He got kicked in the balls by old Joe, so he wants to, put a bullet in that old bastard or something,
Yeah, because
so
all of his boss, all of his friends are dead, so I guess it is just revenge at that point.
Yeah. He's not a very complicated man. He's basically an idiot, as everybody kind of kicks him around, quite freely.
Yep.
But yeah, he kind of breaks it up, and young Joe, with a fun little kind of night jousting scene. You have the Kid Blue character on a motorcycle, basically, with his really, really crappy, very hard to aim handgun, like going at full throttle, trying to shoot this stationary target that only has a blunderbuss. I will remind you, like, he's very passionate about his blunderbuss. Like, you see him cleaning it and taking care of it, a lot during the movie and stuff. And we've already established that it has a very limited range.
So
all you got to do,
gameplay on here would be to stay further away.
Yeah, like, you have this motorcycle. You can infinitely outrun him. You have a lot more ammunition. If he tries to run, just kind of get a little closer. Stay about 50 feet away.
He would have grabbed one of the other guns from the armory too, like a rifle or something.
Or a
but he's
rocket
not that,
launcher or anything.
But he's not that smart, so he just has his big revolver.
So he clearly has to charge him down with his very inaccurate revolver at the guy with the large, very powerful shotgun, who then obviously, will shoot his bike, and I think he literally blows his head off with the blunderbuss, which
casually kills him.
I mean, it was a very, very sad moment for the character. Not really, but like, because he's kind of a jerk the whole movie and stuff. But like, it was actually very satisfying in that way. Like, he finally just got his comeuppance for being an idiot. And now you see, like, Emily Blunt. They got in the car and they were just about to make their escape, but old Joe, man, Bruce Willis, what a relentless man that guy is, He's stoically walking down the road, and
he shoots at them. They crash the car because little boy
Sid uses his
out.
telekinesis, and flips the car over.
Not a very effective use of TK in that situation, but he's the little kid, so
he doesn't have much control over it. Yeah,
and then they're running away across the field, and old Joe's shooting at them as they run, and one of the bullets grazes Sid on the cheek, and this displeases him immensely. And
he creates a tornado.
He creates, basically a gigantic blast of air that knocks everyone over, and including the car that young Joe is now driving to try and stop old Joe. So now they're in sort of a line where we see... So they kind of all stand back up, and old Joe's still going to try and kill the kid, and young Joe is like doing the best he can to try and catch up, but he's pretty far away, and he doesn't have a vehicle anymore because it's been knocked over by the blast. And Emily Blunt is between old Joe and Sid, and she's told Sid to run away and just go into the
cornfield.
Yep, and old Joe is about to shoot the kid, but Emily Blunt's in the way, and so we get this scene where it like goes to this sort of cinematic view, and like we get more narration from young Joe, and he's like, and then I saw it all before me, and the story was a circle. I saw a mother willing to die for her son, and a man willing to kill for his wife, and a kid with the bad, like Sid growing up.
Set up earlier that the Rainmaker lost his mother, saw his mother shot in front of him. So
yes, and we got the bad path laid out in front of him. So like, if old Joe kills the mom and the Rainmaker gets away, then actually that's what makes him become the Rainmaker. And so that's
also set up that like the Sid is like, he wants to do good. Like, it's set up like, and that's what Emily Blunt is trying to do, is teach him to be like a good person. So, I mean, it's kind of shallow on the face of it, but like, it's done pretty well in the movie, like as far as characters go and stuff, like it's set up pretty well. But then like, young Joe is like, all right, well, there's only one solution. All he has is his blunderbuss. So he, like, in that moment, like, which is also funny because it's like he's been narrating this whole movie, but it's also like, well, you just killed yourself, like, because that's what he does. In order to stop old Joe, he takes the blunderbuss, points it right at his heart, and kablow, like,
so his line is like, so I changed it, and then he just like shoots himself in the heart, and old Joe just immediately disappears. Young Joe crumples to the ground, and Emily Blunt and Sid are saved. Uh, Young Joe could also have just shot his right hand off. That's another option he had.
Yeah,
and then
well,
he would be
we clearly know he's not the most forward thinker.
Yeah, I guess so. But like, at least that way he'd be like crippled, but not dead. So there's like, I mean, he'd still have his left hand.
I think we can assume that the only way Bruce Willis was ever going to stop, like, he would just catch it with his left hand and shoot him with that one.
I guess maybe like it would have maybe bought him some time, but yeah. But it is. He had more options than just killing himself, but like, I mean, I get it. It's like maybe it's the cinematic, he kills himself, sacrifices himself for, the other people. Isn't it so great? Sure. Like, I guess that's fine. I'd like to point out this is the one part in the movie where it breaks its own rules too. That's the other slight issue I have. And again, I like the movie overall.
Yeah.
But the thing is that this movie kind of works on the principle that like, everything happens the way it did until you cause it to be different. And so what that means is like, old Joe is still in existence, even though young Joe has been dead for 30 years, presumably. Like, old Joe is still in existence until he actually shoots himself, and then old Joe suddenly vanishes. How is it that the Rainmaker, and I do have, I guess, one slight small theory or explanation for this, but it's like, why would the Rainmaker still be the Rainmaker if old Joe didn't kill his mom in the first loop?
That is part of the problem. I mean, we kind of know that, because Sid believes that Emily Blunt's sister was his real mom, and he also saw her, I think, get shot and killed. They set that up. So it's like, okay, maybe he becomes it regardless, unless Sarah is able to raise him. But
Sarah would have raised
but like also
him.
like she wouldn't necessarily have died in that first timeline. So
yeah, so
who knows?
Why was he still the Rainmaker in the first timeline? I do have the small explanation you could offer there, even though the movie never spells it out. But like, you could say maybe that's what happened. Is maybe that hobo that we see Joe scare off, like maybe he would have killed her, and that would have been what caused the Rainmaker the first time around, but we don't have that directly spelled out for this. That could have just been a random hobo that, wasn't actually going to murder anyone. He was just going to be in a little spooky. So,
yeah,
I don't know. The whole thing, the way it's laid out at the end is like, oh, it was a circle. Like, him killing her is what causes him to be the Rainmaker. But it's like, but no, that doesn't make sense.
I think we can. I think that's probably like what they're trying to set up. I mean, a little poorly. You don't really understand maybe necessarily, but that like, yeah, the hobo would have killed her, and the Rainmaker would have come into fruition regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to hear my really, really credible, very, very likely theory
on
I'd love Sid's fatherhood?
It. Sure.
Okay. So all I have to go on is literally like that last like 10 seconds of the movie. Emily Blunt has this like brief moment where she strokes Sid's hair in the same manner that like we have an earlier scene where young Joe is reminiscing about like he can't remember his mother, but he can remember that she would like stroke his hair, like run her fingers through his hair and stuff. So there's that little movement, like she strokes Sid's hair. He had his mother stroke his hair, and also their hair color is the exact same. Mm-hmm. That's my TED Talk.
So you think Joe is this kid's father? And
I do. I think there's a very, very likely possibility that is the case, because also like Sarah lived this very like like she was.
They could have hooked up.
I think they kind of set her
up
as a prostitute. Like she was a prostitute.
While they were high, he probably doesn't have any memory of it.
Mm-hmm. It very much alters your memories and your perception and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's possible.
I think it's a pretty reasonable. There's a distinct moment where they like she has this like, I wonder thing. It's like she doesn't remember his father, and like, but they met in the city. I don't know. I think it's pretty cute. I was like trying to think of a way that like maybe Joe is like I don't. Well, yeah, like it could be.
It's
Like
possible.
I think there's some reasonable evidence in my mind there. I'd have to maybe go through with a fine-tooth comb a little more, but
Mm-hmm. But I mean, overall, pretty good movie, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a couple logical things, like maybe that hobo would have killed her, maybe he wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So there's just like a couple things, like maybe does the timeline fully work? I don't know, but it's interesting. And the other interesting point is, because the future happens the way it does, where like wouldn't, if he stopped the hobo, and therefore like he would have grown up with the mom in theory, until of course old Joe shows up to kill her. But since that hasn't happened yet, but stopping the hobo from killing her did happen, wouldn't, in that span between those two moments, wouldn't that have stopped the Rainmaker from being a thing? And then old Joe.
But part of it is also like the cloud, right? Like he doesn't know necessarily until things are certain. So like until he doesn't kill her, which will be never, because he will always think he has to kill the kid, right? Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, this is a very, very nitpickable movie. Like, you can, like, time travel movies obviously always are, like, to some extent. I think probably Edge of Tomorrow. I haven't seen it in a while. I know you guys just watched it or reviewed it, but like there's always something to like be like, well, wait a second, how does this really work? But it's like
yes.
This movie does it very well. Of like, it doesn't matter. You're gonna fry your brain trying to figure it out. And like Endgame as well does a similar thing of like, okay, it doesn't really matter.
Time travel, yay, we're doing it.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Just accept the way that we're setting it up. And like you're just gonna have to swallow that pill,
So like, it's a well done movie. There's just a couple things with the premise that are like, why do they need to send people back in time to kill them? Why do they then have to send themselves back in time? Like, it is like it's a little wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, but like, it's a well made overall movie that I enjoyed watching. So
just enjoy Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's acting on the screen as they eat steak and eggs in this diner.
I do like that moment in the diner where they've ordered separately. Like, old Joe walks in after young Joe's already ordered, and they ordered, the exact same item. It's kind of fun.
I also like, because like he sets up the French, so he says this line in French to him, and I was curious. So the line is, "Je sais que un veau avait une arme entre vos genoux." Fun little French line that I absolutely butchered, but translated it's, "I know you have a gun between your knees."
Ooh.
Because he would have already realized, that past is becoming clear to him, right? Like, he knows that. And he also knows that young Joe can't speak French, so he's like just flexing on him with his French knowledge. I found that very, very funny, personally. So I'd give this movie a solid thumbs up recommendation to all those fans out there.
I'll give it a thumbs up too. I think I'll be so bold as to say, out of the movies that we've reviewed so far since restarting the podcast, with the exception of Edge of Tomorrow, which is kind of
count.
It doesn't really count. Of the like three movies that we weren't just sort of rediscussing, Munich, Zero Dark 30, Tomorrow War, and now this, I would watch this movie again. I guess I'll give it that review. This is the only movie out of those four that I would actually watch a second time. The other ones, I think I would just be like, yeah, that was a movie. I don't need to see it again. But this one I would watch again in the future for sure. So that is the recommendation I'll give it. It is a enjoyable movie. So
yeah,
there you go.
It's the best Rian Johnson movie around. So
probably the best one he's made. So I don't know. I haven't seen some of his small stuff, but out of Knives Out, Last Jedi, and Looper, I'll give Looper my official recommendation of the Rian Johnson collection. And of course the wine tasting, as featured on the Red Letter Media YouTube channel. That's also up there.
A great performance by his. For sure.
Outstanding work. But
well, thanks. Thank you very much, Paul, for having me.
Yeah, thank you, not Paul, for coming on.
That's right. I'm glad to be here. You can check me on my Instagram and Twitter, and
Subscribe to me on the Snap Tubes and
check out my MySpace. I'm on LinkedIn, I guess.
But yeah, thanks for coming on and talking movies. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. So
yeah,
sounds
peace out, man.
It was a fun time. Good night.
It was good time. See ya.